Israel, you ready? Okay. So I'm going to have you go stand next. I'm going to tell you to do that in a second. Welcome to part 1 of our 2-series course on composting and soil health in the desert. Because in order to grow in the desert, you need to know how to have appropriate soil. If you don't have appropriate soil, you're going to feel like you're failing a lot of the time, and you don't need to. So the main reason why it matters in the desert is, well, in general, is because compost holds water. So not only does it have nutrients that we need to feed our plants, but in our area where we're extremely drought prone, if we do not use compost, our water goes straight through our soil. We have what's called sandy loam, which means that it's got a high alkalinity, it's got a high salt content, but it does not maintain water. One of the reasons why we get flooding is because we get too much water in one time and it doesn't drain through fast enough, but that's not because we have absorbent soil. That is just because of the fact that it's too saturated going down. When we add compost, compost can hold 100 pounds of water for every 80 pounds of compost. So if you have 100 pounds of compost in a box and you fill it up with water, you're looking at about 185 pounds of weight right there. So instead of having to spend a lot of money irrigating, if you use compost, you're actually using a lot less water in general because it's staying in one spot. Awesome. The biggest benefit to doing compost is that we're not using any of our waste as a waste item. We're not throwing it in the trash, we're not getting rid of it, we're turning it back into soil. Average cost of a soil amendment or a potting soil mix or compost at the store is like $7 to $8 a bag, and that's only going to get you like 1.5 to 2 cubic feet. Problems with that are going to come up in a second, but if you're starting a garden and you're like, oh, I want to do a raised bed, say a 6 foot by 3 foot bed, you're going to be looking at probably 15 or 16 bags to fill that up. So you multiply that by $7 or $8 a bag, and you can easily, just for dirt, get into the hundreds of dollars range. And a lot of people go, oh, I can't start a garden, because here I show up to Home Depot or Lowe's to get all of this stuff, and all I can do is afford the dirt. I can't afford the plants. So instead of doing that, you make it yourself. You source your food scraps, you use your food waste, you use your lawn cuttings, you use mulch. You can get mulch from us if you need it, want to start at home. But we use a local arborist. So you can always call a local arborist or sign up for Chip Drop to get that as well. Do we have any Spanish speakers in the group? Do you prefer it in English or Spanish?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, and the next slide.
So, compost, they make
You like
smelly.
positive?
They think disgusting, gross, has an odor to it. But the reality is that when you get compost, you're getting dirt. The microbial activity breaks down and literally creates dirt. What you smell is dirt. This one has a little bit of a citrus hint because it had a lot of peach peels in it.
We do an average of 300 to 400 pounds of orange peels every week in our community composting. We mix that with manure from the animals that are on site, and we also mix that with food waste that community members bring. That probably averages, what, like 120 pounds a week? It collectively of just food scraps outside of the orange peels. We'll pick up coffee grounds from Espresso Self, and that's usually 50 to 80 pounds a week. And we mix all of those as well as mushroom blocks from Canyon Creek mushrooms with wood chips. When you go somewhere and people talk about how the compost smells awful or compost is stinky, it's because their pile is not done right. If you go and you have this sour you actually do not have any microbial activity happening. So what's happening is it's rotting. In order to compost, you need aerobic, meaning that you have air, you have water, and you have good microbes that are breaking down. When we get anaerobic digestion, which it will decay, that's when you get that nasty, rancid kind of landfill smell that's super sour and nobody wants to be around it. When we do our troubleshooting in our community composting or in our composting workshops, a lot of times people go, oh, I tried to compost, but it never did anything. It just smelled horrible and it attracted bugs. When I talk to them, most of the time they're not adding any wood chips or cardboard. So they might throw in some landscape, like being materials or some weeds here and there, but those are still your nitrogens. So you have your ratio of carbon and nitrogen that's important. When we are breaking down in the desert, our heat here actually causes that breakdown to happen faster. So if we're doing things properly, we can fill a geobin this size all the way up and have it all the way open, and in about 5 weeks, we've got completely finished compost. Because if we fill this up on a Friday, by the next Friday, it's dropped about 6 to 12 inches. Because that is heating up, and when I was messing with that one, it was over 130 degrees inside the pile. You can heat water up in that, so you could get a plastic bucket and you put water in there. There's a lot of people who do off-grid homesteading, and they will actually do that in their compost piles to bathe in. It's a lot of extra work, but it's also passive. You're not having to heat it up yourself, you're just having to go pick up the buckets later on. Next slide. Thermometer and temperature checks is really important. So like I was talking about, when it comes to the ratios, your greens, which are your nitrogen producing products, are going to be 40%. Greens is anything that is still green or alive. Food waste, breads, pastas, rices, any sort of landscape clippings, tree trimmings, plants and weeds that you're throwing in there, eggshells, coffee grounds, coffee filters, tea leaves, tea bags, all of that, feathers and pet hair, is considered a nitrogen. Your carbons are literally your cardboard and your wood chips. And you need to have that weight broken down by volume. A lot of people go, oh, I have 45 pounds of food scraps, I'm gonna mix it with like 65 to 70 pounds of mulch, but it needs to be the visual volume. So if I'm filling up a tote of food waste, I'm gonna then fill up a tote and a half about with mulch to make sure that my volume ratios are appropriate. The biggest thing is people will build a pile and then they'll water it. But if that water's not being put in layer by layer as you're building your pile, you've only wet the top. It's also a big deal if you're getting wood chips that are really old, because if they haven't been watered, essentially, they become hydrophobic, meaning that you'll water your pile and it'll push the water away. So then you're not getting any of that breakdown that you need, or you're not gonna get it as quickly as you need. So watering all of your wood chips is really important, or just fill a tote bin up, throw your wood chips in it, let it soak overnight, and then add it to your compost. Or you could, some people will leave it routinely, but with our mosquito population here, it's not recommended because they will breathe inside of that water as well. The other thing is air. When you have your bin filled, and this is where people really like the tumblers. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the compost tumblers. No? So think of like a barrel, and it's on a little stand and it has a handle, and it's got 2 openings or 1 opening depending on the size, and you throw all your food scraps in it and then you just turn the handle. So you don't have to grab a pitchfork, you don't have to dig into it. They're really common for an at-home composting bin because they're super easy and you don't need to do any sort of manual labor. With these guys, you have to get a pitchfork and dig in and get the pile turned and aerated appropriately so that we can make sure that we get air inside of the pile. If you do not have air inside of that pile, you're not turning it and making it nice and fluffy, your compost will stop. Your temperatures will shoot up above 170 degrees, and you will no longer have an active pile because it'll go from 170 all the way down to 80 really fast. We're talking within about 48 hours. So we don't want to kill our microbes, especially if we've put in all of that work. So we want to start off right in the beginning. So we build our pile, and then we make sure once a week, twice a week in the summer when it's really hot, we're digging that pile and turning it. And as you turn that pile, you're adding water to that pile. So instead of coming out and pushing top water, because you can't really water the sides properly, especially in a tumbler, you're going to turn it and you're going to hose it. You're going to turn it and you're going to hose it. You're going to turn it and you're going to hose it. I recommend gray water. If you're washing your dishes and you have the ability to save some of that gray water, you can water your plants with it. If you're using plant-friendly, biodegradable soaps, you can then take that and add it to your pile as well. That's going to help make sure that you are moisturized. Switch to the next one. So there are many types of composting. So hot composting, which is what we're talking about primarily today, is called thermophilic composting, and it's basically like an active science project. So a lot of what we are doing is making sure that we're hitting 120 to 150 degrees inside of that pile so that it breaks down quickly and it breaks down properly. So we're killing off any sort of seeds that could be in there from any weeds that we've pulled or plants that we've put in there. We're killing off any pathogens, and we're killing off salmonella because we use manure, so we need to sustain 135 degrees for 15 days in a row. That way we don't end up with a situation where we're giving out compost and it's full of bacteria. We want good bacteria and good microbes and not bad. Then we have cold, which is passive, which is essentially, if you think of like the forest floor, that is considered cold composting. Layers of leaves fall, rain happens, wind happens, it kind of moves things around. The bacteria will digest it, it'll break it down, but it takes like a year. So the forest floor is usually multiple layers and varying stages of decomposition because there's nothing that's making it really hot except for that bottom inch or two. In vessel, which is this nice fancy thing that we have up on the top right, is a mechanical system. So think of like plug and play, like your Roku TV. It's super easy to access, we don't have to stress out about it, it's always connected. This machine comes in with an auger, which is like a giant spinning thing, and it will maneuver in and out of your piles and turn it. It'll spray it with water when it needs to, and it'll take temperatures. And in about 2 to 3 weeks, you have finished compost, and it will then move on to the other side. You can also do smaller versions of in-vessel composting, which allows you to basically make a composter with a hoop house and some bricks, and then use your own battery drill with an auger to get it going, and then you use automatic timer irrigation, and you can use electronic thermometers, because they now make thermometers like that big orange guy that you saw is basically a weapon. So it can push through some really stiffly packed compost piles and give you a good reading. But now they make electronic ones where it's like plug and play. You push it in, and it takes 2 readings every 15 minutes. It tells you what that data is, which for us in the summertime means that we have 19 geobins. So we've got 19 of these, and we have what are called smart stacks, and I'll show you that in a little bit. We have 4 of those, and we have a 3-bin system. We also compost directly in our garden beds. So all of our community garden beds that we have on site, we did not do any sort of separate system and then move it. We layered that like a lasagna, made sure we watered it really well, let it drop, added more until we had a nice full 8 foot by 4 foot or 6 foot by 3 foot bin. That is the cheapest way to create soil on your own and not have to go buy soil. You just have to be a little bit patient, about 5 to 8 weeks to really get that going. And then you've saved all your money, and the only money you did was spend it on a really nice raised garden bed frame. If you're gonna plan on doing it on the ground, you put it right on the ground and you cover it with a tarp and you work your pile right there on the ground, and then you have your raised garden bed dirt or your in-ground garden bed dirt. You don't have to pay for it. Vermicomposting. We have a worm bin back here. So worms like pre-compost, which is like chopped up little bits of food. They like food that is already bad. If I put a fresh piece of celery in there, they're not touching it. They will wait until it starts to rot, but by that time all of the moisture has added wetness and dampness to their enclosure, and they will move up and down through the floors to eat cardboard remnants, and different worm species will eat different things, so you can have a variety of them. Happy worms leave these little tiny cocoon-looking pillbox-looking things, and they are actually worm eggs. So they will lay 5 or 6 eggs. You'll see all these little white wiggly things coming around for a few days, and then you just kind of poof into a worm. Worm composting is very easy. It really doesn't smell. It doesn't really attract any pests, and you can have them on the countertop in the kitchen. You can have them in the bathroom. You can have them underneath the sink. So no matter where you live, vermicomposting is a really easy way to have like a composting system for yourself and your house plants or your patio plants without having to have a lot of space taken up. They make nicer looking versions of that don't involve plastic. They also make, the Riverside County Department of Waste Resources has geobins like this for $18 for Riverside County residents. They also have vermicompost bins for $35 that are made out of 10-gallon totes. So they pre-drill the holes and they have it set up so you basically live with this hideous looking tote bin. We use them all the time. On the ground, you can cover it with whatever you need to. Contact paper works pretty great and make it look nice, but it allows your worms to live in there and you to harvest all of their castings. Bukashi. Has anybody in here made kimchi before or sauerkraut? Okay. Yeah?
Yeah, but I mean, not like in my own way.
Did you have like a burping system going?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever made wine? No? Okay. So both of those systems use a fermentation process. So the containers, did anybody remember when Tupperware would tell you to cover your container and then burp it? Okay. Same idea, except they usually have a little valve that will kind of release itself once it's built up with enough gas so that we don't have an explosion. Bukashi is what is really popular in like downtown Los Angeles and areas where there's not necessarily community composting access, as well as in areas like New York, where there's a ton of waste and people can't easily access some of the community composting sites to take their food. Because it's an in-vessel, unscented, outside of its little burp moments, fermenting process, it will actually completely dissolve all of the waste that you put into it and turn it into a liquid. you can then take that liquid, mix it with water, and pour it right on your plant. Bokashi is one of the most expensive types of compost amendment to purchase commercially because of how it's made and because it has so many nutrients in it. You ready for the next slide? Next slide. So the biggest issue that we have with soil, especially in the desert, is we don't have microbes. And the ones that we do are things like root knot nematodes. So if you've ever planted like 5 or 6 trees and all of them are doing great except for this one, if you dig up the root area and you look at it and you notice that the roots aren't doing this, but they're doing this, that's a root knot nematode. They actually eat away at the roots of the plant to the point where the plant doesn't grow properly because the roots are growing back on itself. You can treat that by using other nematodes to eat those nematodes and eat those nematodes' larvae. Those good nematodes are also found in compost. So you can grow them yourself and not have to spend $30 rehydrating an item and spraying it on your lawn. You can instead make compost tea and spray it on your lawn. The soil food web is essentially, we have clay that is in most soils. We don't have a ton of that. There's a section of Joshua tree and I think like areas of Thermal and Coachella that have a lot of clay, but we don't have that in this side of the valley. So if you erase that, you basically end up with your sandy loam, your rocks, your coarse shale, some lime, but it just drains. There's nothing really holding that down. So when we add compost on the top of our soil or we mix it in with our soil, we are taking our sandy loam and turning it into something that allows drainage, but also keeps all of that moisture available, even at a lower level, which helps protect our water table. But in addition to protecting our water table, it helps prevent issues with our plants. Okay, the next one. There's some snacks here and popsicles if they want some. Soil testing. So this is something that if you're really going to get into like planting and gardening, I highly recommend that you at least buy an at-home test kit, and you make sure that the soil that you're grabbing, you're not touching with your hands. So you get like a spoon or something fresh out of the dishwasher so it's considered sterilized, scoop it, and then do your test with it. Or you can actually send it to the Riverside County Department of Agriculture Extension Lab, which is in, ironically, San Bernardino, and they will test it for you. And I think the test is like $12 to $17, but it'll give you a really comprehensive feedback on what your soil has, and depending on what you want to plant, what you're deficient in. If you're doing compost, it's a really good way to say, okay, my compost is really like nutrient dense in this, this, and this. If I'm using something that's very manure heavy, I'm going to get a higher nitrogen rate than if I'm not using any manures in it at all. And that's just because manure will break down, but still have a high volume, unlike plant material, which will break down and not really retain that nitrogen level. So you can send it to a lab. You can actually look at your, if you have a microscope or access to a microscope, you can look at the actual microbes living in your soil, which is little cells and little squiggly lines, and actually see what is in there that we can't see. Next slide. So reading results, your main things that you need to pay attention to is the pH. It's going to show you whether or not you're acidic, whether you're alkaline, and then basically what you need to do to fix that. So compost changes our alkaline soil and makes it neutral, which is what most plants like, or a little bit acidic. But too much acid is going to kill off anything that's not a blueberry, blackberry, strawberry, boysenberry, goji berry. Basically, if it's got a berry at the end of it, they generally like acidic soil. Roses also like a little bit more acid. Most other plants do not. So if you're going to get soil and you've made it, but it's still really acidic, like the orange peels didn't fully break down, we're planting in it, we're going to notice our plants wilt really fast and die off. We don't want that. Organic matter, compost, it improves our soil structure, moisture retention, and microbes. It can feed for months and months and months. A lot of the soils that we purchase at the store are full of synthetic fertilizers. So you know those little balls that you see in the soil, like little blue ones, little white ones? While fertilizers are great, we don't necessarily want something that's going to sit in our soil for 10 years. In our area, our soil will hold that. It'll go down into the water table, but it'll also hold it. And if you've ever been through a desert storm here, you're inhaling it. So the last thing that we want is water-soluble chemicals blowing into our faces, and then we're breathing it in. One of the reasons why we have the highest asthma rate that we do is because the Salton Sea has so much agricultural runoff still in that soil. So when the wind blows and it's coming this direction, it's picking up all those particulates and blowing it into our face. And that's in addition to a lot of our major agriculture that pushes through. So macronutrients and micronutrients. When we look at nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, those are like our main course of the meal, so our vegetables and our fruits. Then we look at our proteins, and that's our micronutrients. And those are gonna allow us to keep things going, making sure that we're not having pest issues that are related from essentially malnutrition plants. Fun fact, most of the stuff that you're buying at Home Depot or Lowe's as far as your plants go, are not meant for you to have them around for very long. So they're fed really chemically heavy, and they are put into the soil here, and they're not always desert appropriate plants. So when we're looking at what varieties to plant, we want something that is more heat tolerant so that we're not having it die off at the beginning of summer or bolt 3 months into planting something that we should have had for 6 months. A big problem that we have is a lot of the store purchased cilantro, which is why you're seeing less and less of it at the store every year, bolts really, really early because it's not meant for the heat, it's meant for the cold. Cilantro was modified to grow in cold places so that people could have it in different areas, but what we get as far as our seeds go is generally not the cilantro that we need for cooking, and that is a high heat cilantro. So if you want to buy cilantro seeds, I highly recommend that you go to a market. Like even if you're buying them dried inside of Cardenas or what is the other one? Vallartas or Rancho Grande, those are already ready. You can literally squish that coriander pod up and you have cilantro seeds. That is giving you something that is less chemically treated, but it's also going to make sure that you're growing a high heat variety. Any questions so far?
Yes. You mentioned that different types of plants require different acidity.
Yes.
So I was wondering how you safely raise the acid level for like berries.
So you can buy a commercial acidifier, or you can mix bone meal. You can also use gardening lime. That'll pop that up a little bit. There's other uses for that too, but you can mix it in with your soil. And basically what you do is add like a teaspoon at a time, mix it up, and then retest. So it's taking a little bit of patience, or you go with the package instructions and you dump a half a cup in and you hope that was the right bowl. And a lot of people can do that pretty safely because they're slow release acidifiers. Those things like hydrangea bloom mix is the one that'll tell you like, oh, it'll take your flowers from blue to pink. That is an acidifier. So that's actually less expensive than buying a normal soil acidifier for your blueberries. And that one is pretty shelf stable if you're getting it from like, I'm trying to remember what the name is. It's an organic company, which is just a weird label. I will add it to the stuff I send out after this class. But that is a really good shelf stable one where you don't have to test anything. You can just kind of scoop it per the directions, mix it up, and you're good. Anything else? Yes.
For the cilantro,
Yes.
Cardenas or like Rancho Grande, they sell the seeds or you find
So you go into like the spice section, and they sell it as coriander.
Okay.
Because the cilantro seed is coriander, which is why everybody in like all of Europe calls cilantro coriander, because they don't realize that it's technically two different sections of plant. But that, you just take those little balls and you crush them up, and you've got like 30 seeds in there.
Oh.
About half of them are going to germinate, and you can just top sprinkle them, and they will pop up. You're welcome. Next slide. So when we look at the health of our soil, we want our soil to be nice and thick with nutrition, but also the ability to absorb that water without being root rotty. And that's because we want to mix it with our native soil. So we don't just we do with our little seedlings, but when we're putting them in the ground, we're putting them in the ground with other soil types so that we're making sure that we have respiration. The air can go to the roots of the plant and mix in. We have some sort of slake. We have good color. If I'm squeezing my compost and my compost stays like a wet ball, my compost is too wet. Your compost should basically be like a wrung out sponge. So I'm going to pick that up and I'm going to hold it, and it feels damp. I don't necessarily want to wipe it on my face, but it's not hard, crunchy, dry. If I squeeze it and water is dripping out of it, I have way too much moisture, and that pile is just going to rot from anaerobic digestion. So the color should be dark and rich and in the dark brown to the black hue. If we have stuff that's tan or colored like food, it's not breaking down properly. The respiration part is really big because that is just meaning that we can get airflow. If it's not any of the other things, you're not getting enough airflow in there to properly have anaerobic digestion. So this type of system is really common in the Midwest and on the East Coast, and I do see it sometimes here. The problem is the plastic, while it has tons of holes for ventilation, it gets really, really hot. So it's almost like if you were to solarize something, you're not necessarily breaking it down as much as you are cooking because you're getting that heat way too high. So out here we do recommend different types of systems, and while those look really great and they're usually pretty affordable, you would be better off building your own system or purchasing a system that is made out of wood or this geovent where you have a lot of airflow happening. The covered ones are not the greatest for, well, they're great for rodent and deer prevention. They're not great for actually breaking down in our heat section. Next slide. So integrating it. It says on the farm, but you can do it in your yard. So basically, you can take your compost directly when it's finished, and you can put that on your plants. You could also take that compost, put it into water, and agitate it for 2 or 3 minutes, leave it for 24 hours, agitate it again, and then you have live microbes that you can pour onto your plants. So you're still giving them the nutrients, but if you have houseplants and you don't want to throw your compost on your houseplants because it's been outside, you can take that water and you can pour that water in. So you'll get those good microbes, you'll get the nutrients, but you're not having to add soil to, say, your orchids. You can mix it in a spray bottle and spray your orchids, and it'll act as orchid food. I still recommend supplementing with very specific things for those types of plants, especially if they're air root plants. But outside of that, you can foliage fertilize your indoor house plants by making compost tea. You can also use compost tea on your trees. You can use it on any of your shrubs. You don't have to use it just specifically on fruit-producing plants. Next slide. So when we look at growing things, we have a lot of stressors that come from the desert with our plants, and one of them is heat related. So if we have enough moisture retention in our soil, our plants are not shrinking out, they're not dying, they're not stressed out. When plants are stressed, they actually emit chemicals into the air that cause bugs to flock to them to eat them. So it's almost like if we're sick and we have, ravens following us, like there's not a good sign, especially if you're like wandering in the desert on a hike and they're like, oh hey, I could eat you. That's how bugs look at plants the second they get stressed. They start to change their pheromones. And when we look at traditional spacing requirements in the desert, whether you're doing food-producing trees, shade trees, or food-producing plants, I throw those out the window. If you go to any of the places that have citrus trees, for example, that have been growing for 60, 70 years, they're not growing in nice uniform 12-foot spacing. They're tighter together. And the reason why is their root system will actually connect to each other and provide that plant to have more strength and stability in our environment, because our environment is really toxic to a lot of plants. So to prevent their stress, we make sure that we have slow release nutrients in our compost. We have the moisture retention in our compost, that it's getting to the actual roots of the plants, and it's not just a top dress for trees. For trees, we want to mix that at the very bottom so that as that taproot grows down, it's able to feed. It also supports biodiversity, meaning if we're planting in just our soil here, we're not going to get a lot of variety of things that will survive and thrive. We will have our native wildflowers that will do wonderfully. We'll have our native weeds that will do wonderfully, which are still wildflowers. But we're not going to get them to grow a tomato and other things and actually give us a good yield. The plant is going to constantly be stressed. So using compost allows us to build that up and plant all kinds of things. So not are we getting native plants with it, we're building our native plants into our systems, but we're able to put trees, food-producing plants that are small shrubs, vines, and ground cover all into one space. Next slide. So the other thing is, when we look at planting, a lot of people will get that stressed plant cycle, then you have all the pests. That pest comes to flock to that one plant and goes, oh, you have 30 more. Let me just lay all my baby eggs here and go eat the rest of them. So then we're going to Home Depot or Lowe's and we're going, hey, what do I have to kill this? And a little bit of pest pressure, most plants can handle that. So most plants will be able to be nibbled on and eaten on by caterpillars and beetles and different things, and not really succumb to that and not have a stress out in their yield as long as we have healthy plants. If we start them off unhealthy, or if we start them off where they're just not getting the nutrients as they grow, or they bolt up and then there's nothing else happening, we are going to see a lot of insect damage. We just harvested a cauliflower and there's a lot of caterpillar activity, so you can see where they've eaten the leaves off of it. There's a lot of caterpillars that are super beneficial to our ecosystem that turn into butterflies. Tomato hornworms are not among them, in my opinion. So I feed those to the chickens. But the rest of them are, and so all I do is trim off leaves that are really badly damaged like that, and I throw them in the compost, or I feed them to a cow. And everything else gets to stay. If we are paying attention to what pest pressure we have, and we look at ways we can do things without a bunch of chemicals, we're actually saving it. So we're not consuming it, it's not going in our soil, and we're not killing off species that we didn't want to harm. Next slide. So our nonprofit farm sanctuary is in Sky Valley. We have a closed loop system. So what that means is that our food waste on site, whether it's from us in the house or it's our food diversion, because we pick up edible food, we recover it and give it out when we can, that will get fed to the animals, and if it can't, it goes into compost. Manure goes into compost. The wood chips go into compost. Cardboard for the boxes that we get gets cut up, put in a wood chipper, and goes into the compost. So we try to have a minimal impact, not only on the environment, but also on our costs. Because when you look at, okay, you have 5 Amazon boxes. By the time you shove that in your recycling bin, that recycling bin is full. If you cut that up, that actually makes like a maybe 3-inch layer of mulch. And if I need to use a lot of mulch, we cut up, it was like 200 boxes. And it took us about 9 hours collectively with a little Ryobi cutter, and it took about 25, 30 minutes through a wood chipper. And then we used that in 2 weeks. So it's a really good way to get rid of stuff without adding to the landfill. Those boxes in the landfill are not going to break down for 15, 20 years. They'll get hard, they'll get crunchy, they'll get brittle, but they're not actually turning into anything. So if we can avoid doing that, that's great. But also, if you don't have to pay that extra fee for like an overcharge for too much stuff, or the bins are full at your apartment complex and you can't take it and move it somewhere else, you don't have to wait till the next trash day. You have a way to cut it up and put it into a community compost site and utilize it another way. Or you can start a whole big thing now. Next slide. So, compost from large waste disposal sites. And this is a big one because we have the ability to get truckloads of compost at a really affordable rate locally, but there's some issues with that across the board. So the emissions are lower when you're buying compost locally. You're cost effective, it's way cheaper or even free for farmers and residents compared to bagged compost from the store, because again, that's going to be running you $7 to $8 on average, and it can go higher if you want to slap a certification label on it. You're getting it from your local area, so the footprint of the whole thing is a lot lower. Pathogen safety regulations are being met, so you're not getting something that's, you're not supposed to not be getting something that's nasty. Cons are it's inconsistent because of the fact that the feedstocks vary. So not everybody screens for plastic, metal, or glass contamination. So you could end up with a truckload of compost that you can't have your kid's garden with you in because it's got shards of glass or plastic, and then you're growing your plants in microplastics that we do not want in our soil. Possible herbicide residue, because they're not screening for that, they're just taking any of those green waste items and putting them through. So if you have tons of herbicide on it and you get good compost out of it and you planted it and everything starts dying, test it and see if there's any sort of herbicide residue in it, because it could be that you bought all this compost and you can't use any of it. Limited biological diversity, because they're shoving it through a in-vessel system and it's at a really high heat rate so that they can get a rapid turnaround. You're not necessarily getting something that is full of really healthy, good microbes. You could get something that looks like compost but is dead soil, meaning you're going to have to supplementary feed everything. Next slide. So think about where your personal compost ends up. Think about the food waste and the cardboard that your friends and your family have and where that goes. If you know where your local refuse station or landfill is, if you've ever been there, if you know what it looks like, what it smells like, and then would you use large-scale compost from any of those sites on plants that you're feeding to your family? Next slide. Store-bought bagged compost mixes. So they're convenient, they're easy to grab, you can get a bag here and there, you can put them in your car, you're not having to buy a truckload of it and have to find somebody to bring that truckload home. But because it's pasteurized, it's heated to a really high heat level. So while it will be cleaner than commercial products are, because they do screen heavily and they have to do all of these different testings, it's not necessarily full of microbes, so it won't necessarily continue to break down things in the soil and feed your plants. So again, supplementary nutrition might be needed. It's good for really small gardens, container beds, raised beds, and it's immediately readily available. You don't have to do any searching. You just drive in, pay your fee, get your bag, and go. The problems with it is it's very expensive. That convenience factor of bagged compost and bagged soils are extremely expensive. Because they can have fillers. Coco Coir is great, but that's not necessarily used as a filler. You get other items that make sure that you have the volume that doesn't necessarily feed your plant. So it could be a moisture absorber so that you have the moisture retention, but it's not feeding your plant, so you just spent all this money and again, supplementary feeding. They can be dead from that pasteurization process. So then you have to go buy microbes or get compost tea or get worm castings and add it into your soil so that it helps to break things down and feed your plants. So when we look at landscape yards, so like, I don't know, does West Coast do that? So West Coast and, where's the other one? Southwest? Yeah, are the two main ones. And they do have compost. Now theirs come from specific farm producers, so it's a little bit different. It's kind of like in between community compost access and a large-scale farming access. So you can get it affordable in volume, you can have it delivered to you, it's easier to blend in with other soils, but they're not usually going through the same certification processes because it's done on farm. It's also supposed to be not only watered in almost immediately, like when you get it dumped, you have to go out there and water it like it's your garden bed and keep it moisturized. Otherwise, you're spending all this money and all this time, and it's not going to grow anything for you. This will get dried and become hydrophobic. When you are looking at your soil, you want it to be nice and dark. You want it to smell good, not nasty, not pale. If it's a taupey color, there's something really wrong, and you need to send a picture to us and ask so we can tell you what to do. You also want to make sure that it has that crumble. So if you pick it up, you can see that it's nice and moist, but it'll still crumble apart. It's not just going to just fall apart like dust. That's when we don't have hydrated soil. Smell and odor, it should smell like dirt. Outside of that first week of smelling like, especially if it's citrus related, you'll have a really strong, and it's not bad, it just smells like orange peel. If you've ever made orange peel house cleaner with like vinegar, it has that kind of odor to it. Outside of that, you're not going to smell anything except dirt, like freshly rained down soil. Like if you go to Cherry Valley where they actually have soil on the ground, and you grab that and you smell it. That's how your compost should smell. It should never be sour. It should never smell like food. It should never smell like anything else except what you're making. So compost and climate change. Now you can see we have emissions that we have right from our vehicles, from our energy use, from breathing. Cows are actually one of the biggest methane producers in general, and we really feed the cattle industry. Cows burp and cows fart. That's all they do all day long on top of eating. If you do not compost their poop, they will actually be one of those passive composters where their manure will break down and actually start feeding the soil really rapidly without being composted. Whereas horse manure has to be composted to do anything, other than it becomes a weird, fluffy padding. In our area, composting happens a lot hotter. But you can see the areas where we have a temperate zone, we have a tropical zone, polar, subpolar. So those are kind of average temperatures. And the hotter you get in our area, the harder it is to keep your compost hydrated. So making sure that you're paying attention to it really does matter, because if it's not breaking down aerobically, it's putting methane emissions into the air. So it kind of defeats the purpose. So there's a whole list of entities that you can go to for accessing materials, for accessing hands-on workshops for gardening, for any sort of composting, for plant seed libraries, etc. I believe there might be one here, but I know there's one in Rancho Mirage. So if you have a library card and you go to Rancho Mirage, you can check out seeds, and I believe they either have one here or they're starting one here. Seed swaps. There's gardening groups here locally where you can swap plants, you can swap seeds, you can show up with no plants and they'll give you plants. If you have an interest in a plant, they're shoving that plant in your face and telling you to take it home. They'll tell you all about it. And those are free. So Puerto de Valle is local. CDFA Healthy Soils is a website. UCANR is a website. So is the United States Composting Council, which is USCC. And I'll send you all these links with your slides as well. The Institute for Local Self-Reliance, we are a part of them. We're also part of USCC. And the California Alliance for Community Composting. Cal Recycle is actually how we were able to get our main part of our community composting area done. One of their sites had closed down. We got their infrastructure and the Urban Conservation Corps labor support to build it out. The United States Department of Agriculture has a lot of resources. So a lot of people think if I want to start a farm, I have to live on acreage. There are a lot of people who get into microgreens or vermicomposting who live in low-income housing. They get their farm license, they start farming, they start selling at farmers markets, they get their CPC and their nursery license, they go buy their first house. Because you have the ability to access funding as a business that is a farm or an individual that is a farm on a different level than any normal residence does. Primus Permaculture and Composting is in Palm Springs. She has an urban farm in Palm Springs. And then there's us, and we're in Sky Valley. So let's open the floor for discussing what you've done so far, what you haven't done, what you've thought about doing, and any questions that you have after listening to compost. Anything? You have one?
We have started a little small farm of compost in the backyard.
Nice.
I don't know if it's going so great. I don't know if we're doing it right.
That's all right.
But, we do like orange peels and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Just to get it started. And
So with your orange peels, because oranges can make cleaners really well, because their peel acts as an astringent, you're going to want to mix it with mushroom blocks or some coffee grounds, as well as your wood chips. So anytime that you're building your pile, especially if orange peels are involved, any citrus peels are involved. If you go to Canyon Creek Mushroom in Palm Desert, which is like across from Del Webb Sun City, there's mushroom blocks in their trailer 24/7 for free. You just pull up, grab them out. They will still regrow, by the way. So if you end up using those and all of a sudden you have like blue oyster mushrooms, or you've got like trumpet mushrooms growing out, you can eat them. They'll usually bloom 2 or 3 times before they're fully spent, but they toss them after the first harvest. So you can take that, crumble it up, mix it in your compost, and that will help break those orange peels down rapidly. Also using any sort of manure. Chicken, quail, horse, cow, goat, sheep, all in there will help make it break down. Your greens are going to be like 40% by volume, and your browns are going to be 60% by volume. So if you use a 10-gallon tote and you fill it, you figure, okay, that's my 40%, then you're going to need to be closer to a tote and a half of wood chips, and you can either lasagna layer it or you can mix it up. And you can really make like a compost bin out of anything. You can do a trash can with holes aerated and set it in the ground. You can get a geo bin, you can get a tumbler, you can get a terracotta pot, and you need to wet it while you're using a tile drill, and drill holes in it and put that in the middle of your garden and actually add to it in the middle of your garden bed, especially if you throw some worms in there.
okay, I think we need to do
Wood
those
chips?
on the side
Yeah.
because it doesn't have any.
You want that, you want it to breathe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we need some of that.
Yes.
And we need then probably gonna be easier to get the mushroom.
Oh yeah.
Then-
It's super easy to just swing by there whenever you're in the area and just grab them out. I will say it's also really big for moisture retention in your pile in the summertime. We will actually take cardboard boxes and soak them in a tote and then top our bins with that. So I will always weirdly water my cardboard boxes that are on the top. But that allows me to keep a lot of that moisture so that top will dry out and not my wood chips underneath it. Yeah.
Mentioning how we can do a compost in the same garden bed and you want to use, how would the airflow work if it's not?
So think of a terracotta pot,
Okay.
like an Oya.
Mhm.
It goes down and you have a top, so you can actually remove that top. You can drill some holes in that top, so you have aeration there, but the sides going into your garden bed are gonna allow some aeration, but my best recommendation for that is to get yourself some wormies. Happy Worm is local, she's in Rancho Mirage, and she can hook you up with worms, and you can put those directly into your terracotta pot setup with the food scraps. The worms are gonna go through all of that soil and all of that food. So they're gonna help you with your breakdown of the whole process and make that into soil faster, but also make sure it keeps aerated. You're welcome. Does anybody wanna play with this? And see what it's like to set it up? I really recommend these, especially if you're beginning, because you can start off with a nice tight 3-foot pile, or you can go rogue and open the sucker all the way up if you have teamwork effort to help turn that pile. Otherwise, I have some people that have done 2 feet, but when you have it 2 feet, it doesn't necessarily turn that great. So having it at like a 3-foot high, 3-foot wide setup like this allows you to turn it properly, keep it aerated, and not have so much work. The best thing with this is if you're gonna turn it and you don't wanna pitchfork it and like really get in there, you take the clips that it comes with off, you take it off, you move it, and then you shovel your material in. So you're turning it that way and you're not having to dig in around the bin, you can just reset the bin. Play with it. I mean, it's fun. Have at it.
Where do you get those?
So Riverside County Department of Waste Resources has these for Riverside County residents. They're $18 a piece. So you can call them up, and I think they require you to prepay for them still, and it's one per family. Oh, sorry, one per address. So if your family has 3 numbers assigned to your address, you get 3 geobins. Just put a different name on each one. But they've also got the vermicomposting bin, which is new, and I think fascinating.
We're gonna be close to.
Do you want to see some worms?
You wanna see more?
You want me to bring the worm bin around?
Yes, please.
Sorry, she's
Where's Cassie? Yes, you wanna go see worms?
Here, let's just come this way to see the worms. I think we'll put it up in a second. See, look, squish that one. He's going up to the next level. Start digging in. You're okay. This is finished compost. So this layer is more moist than the other, so they'll go up and down. And this is the layer here. They do not love the sunlight. Yeah, some of them are really and that's what you do. So these guys will eat pre-compost, and then the remaining is finished compost. Because I didn't sit it, so to show them. See, I get almost all the way up already. Made it. So then he is. Where's that there? He just came up. He's like, wait a second. There's only like 12 in here. That's their food source. When you feed your worms, you make sure you dig a little hole and you put your food in one spot and you cover it. And you kind of do that a little bit in like 1 or 2 layers. And then you have like more dried material up here so you can cook with it. This one has a spout, so any of the liquids that they make will actually go down here and I can open the tap and pour it out, and then I can use that in the lawn and we need like a really nice green lawn. Or the actual liquid part of worm castings. You can put it in water and you can spend $15 on it. You go to hook up to your, when you guys are done, you're gonna hook up. You can go. You can Eddie's trying to leave. Yeah, they're trying to leave. They're like, no!
I noticed that some of my house plants have bird ones.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's very healthy.
Until it starts like, like little bits of them, like those little things.
Yeah.
Like it starts falling out of the top.
Okay, so that's because they're eating it. So what you do is you take your pot out and you replace your soil and you can put it back in. Or you just get your tub and empty your soil and mix them all up, add some new stuff to put back in. Because they're eating any of the decaying material that's in the root system and they're creating castings, and those castings are what's going to fall out of their soil. Yeah. And so they have to constantly eat. So I'm putting new stuff, especially if it's got like some fibrous material.
Yeah, like I have our compost and I have it on when it's like screwed up, like fun.
Yes.
And I have another kind of,
Well, they're naturally happening.
yeah, that's never happened.
And now they happen.
Now I know.
They don't like the light, so they get. Oh, thank you. They don't love the light, and so they're all trying to hide. Yeah. And this setup, so a lot of the worm bins are a little bit different. This one is one where you have to look at how there's the back side and the sunny side, and you have to place it opposite so that it stacks. Some of them just are made so that they all stack the same. I have a really, really nice wood one that is made by
a neighbor in Ontario, Canada. Actually, Ottawa, because he's in Ottawa. But he makes them with reclaimed wood, and he also supports classrooms. So when you order one, a classroom is one. And it's pretty here. It's really nice. It's so pretty, and it's got it's aesthetically pleasing if you're having a picture counter, whereas this is this is not.
And it's outside.
In our desert, it can stay outside winter into spring. The second we hit 80 degrees, you need to move them inside, unless they're in a really dark kind of insulated building outside, because they will roast.
What if we have them in like the?
If you have them in the garden, they're fine, especially if you've got most of the compost activity happening, because that moisture is gonna help keep them, like, they'll be able to go all the way down. One of my outlets are in the desert now. We're gonna do a little activity. Did you get a chance to say hi? Okay. You want to say anything? What is it? Yeah, you gotta go back. Earthworms are super friendly. They're very delicate. There's only 12 total. You're like, what is happening here? Castings.
They got it.
So come at home.
Yes.
Anybody need sanitizer? Okay. So. Did you guys all get one of
When we look at how we're gonna plant in the desert, I say, look at what you already have. Look at what infrastructure is there. If you already have a tree and it has irrigation and you're just starting out, for most trees, you can use that tree. So we're gonna create a guild. And a guild is essentially a space, it's part of permaculture, which is, all of gardening, by the way, is an indigenous practice. So we have been removed from our food systems, removed from different practices because of colonization. But the big part of that is understanding where it comes from, how the principles were applied, and how we can use that to maximize what we're doing here in the desert. So think of the trees that you already have. If you are in an apartment complex, what trees could you grow in a pot? Because you can have a tree in a pot and you can still companion it with it. You want to have something that's going to give you canopy. So a lot of people use citrus out here because it grows really quickly and will feed you. But then you want something that's going to cover the ground, that is going to prevent water from leaving. So squash vines, melons, things like that are going to be really good at keeping that contained. Then you want something like peas, beans, other legumes that are going to provide nitrogen into that soil. Additionally, look at things like root vegetables. So your radishes are a really good one. They're really easy. Beets, they're going to help aerate your soil. So they're going to keep things moved and opened up. So when you pull them over, soil can move back in, but it's got little air pockets in it. And then you look at any flowers. Because for every food-producing plant that you put in the garden, you need 2 pollinating attracting items, meaning something that isn't just a flower. A lot of food items can have flowers and can attract pollinators, but when we look at our landscaping in general, you see these beautiful gardens. They look like they should belong in a magazine, but they're all the same flower in different colors. You want a variety. You want different colors, different sizes, different shapes. You want microflowers. You want big flowers. You want trumpet flowers. Because that's going to attract beneficial pollinators. Your beneficial pollinators are also oftentimes your best predator prevention when it comes to bugs. Because they're going to attract all of the pollinators that are going to come in, and by eating all of those other nasty bugs, you are not having to use pest control. Your plants are happy because all of those little flowers everywhere are attracting the bugs that feast on the bad bugs. You want those good bugs. Yeah?
So even for like small herbs, you would need 2 pollinators?
Highly recommend it. So like lavender will stay in flower all the time. So planting a lavender plant is a good way to have a pollinating herb. The rest of them don't really flower so much. They're easily propagated through roots or cuttings. If they go to seed, it's very specific conditions. But lavender is also one of those plants where you have to have what's called stratification. So stratification means that your temperature gets cold. We don't have the ability to stratify here because we don't freeze. We don't get really, really cold. And because of that, we have to use what's called refrigeration. So we take our seeds from certain plants, we put them in a Ziploc with either some perlite or some vermiculite that's soaked, and throw it in a Ziploc bag in the refrigerator. We do that for 2 weeks to a month depending on the plant. And then you can take those seeds out and you can sow them. Also, certain types of lavender and certain types of bee balm and certain types of, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, thyme, yarrow is a really good one. They do not like to be buried in the soil. They need light to germinate. So a lot of people dig a little hole, throw their seed in and go, oh, my $4 packet of lavender never grew, because it'll tell you to bury it. But most of the time, they don't like being buried, or they like to be very minimally covered, enough for that seed not to move, but that light will help it germinate and grow. So if you have a heating pad or a plant-specific waterproof heating mat, and you've got a 72 cell, which I say at the end of our growing season, go hit like Tractor Supply, it's my favorite place to go. They'll put all their planting supplies like 90% off. You get like what I did, which is like all the things, yes.
What season would that be?
When you hit like May to June here, all of that stuff stops selling because people are like, it's too hot to grow things. It's not, but that's how our system works. So go hit all those things that are on clearance. August is a really good time for Lowe's and Home Depot to go in and buy gardening spaces, whether it's on a wheeled area or it's not. I don't particularly love plastic pots unless it's a nursery pot because they tend to hold a lot of heat. Terracotta is perfect. But when we look at pots, and we look at like the growing tables, they have like rolling trays. The reason I didn't get them when they were $10 a piece is because It's gonna get hot and it's gonna burn my roots. A lot of people look at, oh, these metal raised beds, they look so nice. They're gonna burn your plant's roots. So we have an example space at the front of our farm where I show people the different types of substrate and what it's growing in. And then I have this one, and I really loved it. I really loved it when I got it. I thought it was gonna be amazing. Unless it is in 100% shade, which most things don't grow in 100% shade, it kills plants. Like I have a kale that is going on its second year, and a collard green and a corn, and they're like this big. And the only thing I harvest off of it is for the tortoises. It's like a little snack here and there, because the roots can't spread out. The roots can't do anything, because the second that they touch the side of that and it's getting direct sunlight, it starts to burn them. So they don't have a lot of space to spread out and grow and stay the way they're supposed to.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe you can listen to my mom. So I bought this sweet potato, right? And it started, you know, like their roots and stuff. And I was like, you know what? And, you know, leaves start so beautiful because
Yeah.
it starts looking purple and it's really nice. And it's been growing, but the problem is that my mom says that it's supposed to kind of like grow underneath, and the leaves are kind of just they're floating on the top because there's like rocks by it. But I kind of was like, it keeps growing.
Now this is a sweet potato, right?
Yeah.
Did you remove the slips and plant them, or did you plant the whole
No.
potato?
No, you know what? I just left it as it is, but it keeps
Okay.
growing. It hasn't died, and
So,
it keeps going.
Yes, because you're gonna get the vine, and the vine is gonna go everywhere. It's
Okay.
like, it's almost not quite as bad as kudzu, because kudzu will go everywhere. Kudzu is also super edible, by the way. But sweet potatoes, unlike regular potatoes, where you can put the whole regular potato in the ground and make
So
more
that's one of
potatoes,
those, yes.
sweet potatoes you have to either cut or gently pull those slips out and put them in some water for like a day or two, and you're gonna get a ton of roots, and then put them in soil,
Oh.
and then put them in the ground.
Oh.
That is going to allow you to get sweet potato tubers growing, and then you'll have the vine, but it'll be bushier instead of viney. And then you'll see those potatoes start to push themselves up above ground, because sweet potatoes operate a little bit differently, and they need to have those slips removed in order to create more tubers. Otherwise it just goes, oh, we have a tuber, grow your plant, keep growing that tuber, and then your tuber's gonna get this weird wrinkly, funky look to it and shrink, but it's still gonna have the vine. Now the vine is really nice and is often sold at like Lowe's and Home Depot as ornamental. And people do that. They just take a little cutting of that potato and put it in there, so it just stays as a vine. But you can actually grow more tubers. Yeah.
Just like, I mean, it's
Now if you dig it up and you remove the slip and you set the slip back in the soil, it'll grow, but it'll start growing new tubers.
Yeah, because the potato in itself hasn't like shrunk at, you know, like, yeah, it's still,
Yeah.
it's shrunk,
Yeah,
you know,
so
but you can
pull some
still.
slips off. You can keep that one going, so but take some slips and add them. Now, the rockier the soil for potatoes in general, the harder it is to grow. Unlike a radish, which will absolutely move that ground with no problem and take that weird funky shape, especially daikon radishes, they'll go big. The potatoes kind of hit a rock and go, oh, I can't go anywhere else. So they're not a great aeration item because they'll compete for nutrients with the roots. They also suck a lot of nutrients up. They need a ton more moisture, but they really need fluffy soil.
Okay.
So grow bags are really good for potatoes, but you could also do potatoes in a raised bed. That way you can have more aerated soil. My caution from my personal experience is if you're growing potatoes, not so much sweet potatoes, but just potatoes in general, you need to pay attention to the ants. Because you will have and ants will farm aphids, by the way. So one of your pest problems is going to be with, especially with fruitier, juicier plants, the ants will farm aphids. The aphids will damage your plant, but the ants are actually farming them. So they're harvesting what the aphids are drawing up for them. It's a whole ecosystem that we don't really pay attention to.
I love how passionate you sound.
It's fun. But diatomaceous earth that's food grade, you can get a little flour sifter, bye-bye ant problem.
Oh, what?
Diatomaceous earth. You can get it online, you can buy it at the store.
Write that for me down, please.
It's gonna come in notes, you'll get notes at the
Oh,
end.
okay, thank you.
So ants are a pest for all?
They can be. So we have ants all over our compost areas. They're not biting us, we just kind of leave them alone. But when it comes to potatoes, they will eat the potato. They'll like create whole tunnels through the potato and they'll take it back to their colony.
Are they just red ants or black ants?
It's both. And we categorize them as red ants and black ants, but there's like multiple species in both of those groups. Now I'm convinced that black ants don't bite. I have been told repeatedly that they do bite. I look at all red ants as mean. They bite everybody. Especially our fire ants. Fire ants are not the same as traditional ants. We can still get them, but diatomaceous earth is a really good way. If you see fire ants, call vector control. They will come out and help sterilize the colony so that they stop growing. Another way to help with pest prevention is taking gardening lime, mixing it with water. So you know when you see trees, they have that white stuff on the bottom of them? It's usually gardening lime. So you could, there's a specific ratio, you can mix that up and actually paint it on the base of your plants. That prevents pests from eating at the base of your plants, prevents them from walking up and down on your plants, but it doesn't harm your plant. In the summertime with trees, kaolin clay is huge. Kaolin clay is food grade, but you can mix it up in a pesticide thing, one of the little sprayer pumps. Open that nozzle up and spray your trees so that they can still photosynthesize, they can still get all the oxygen, they can produce their carbon dioxide, they can do all the fun stuff. However, or vice versa, but they can't burn. So they don't get that crumbly wilted leaf and they're not stressed out.
And when you do that, because we have it like I think it's like an orchid like from Hawaii.
Yeah.
And I noticed
Is it
that-
inside or outside?
It's outside. But I noticed that it is like a huge tree, but I'm pretty sure it's old.
Is it a
I
what
don't
are
know
they called?
exactly the name, but
You and I just saw them the other day.
flowers.
Hong Kong orchid.
Yes,
It grows as a tree.
yes.
That you can use a little bit of kaolin clay, but not like you could douse an apple tree or a plum tree. So just, I would very, very thinly make that up. I will look into that and see if there's a
But for the
ratio
lime,
set for that.
the lime thing,
I would not use a lime.
No.
No. Oh, that's beautiful. You did such a good job. I think that she might want those notes.
I do.
Another thing I want to add too is a lot of stores in our area sell trees. That doesn't mean the tree is meant for our environment. If you say, I want plums, I want apricots, I want nectarines, I want peaches, I want apples, you need to know what the chill hours are. So a chill hour means that it's 45 degrees or below, and how many hours we have that are 45 degrees or below. Because they need a certain number of hours in their dormancy period in order to make fruit. So you could have this glorious, massive apple tree with flowers, and you might only get like maybe a dozen apples on it, if any. And it's because it probably needs 800 chill hours. We don't get 800 chill hours. So anything that you plant out here needs to be like in the 150 to 300 zone. I would never go over 300 because you're not going to get the fruit yield that you should. And that's really important to know. Also, some stone fruit is like really heavy yield one year and the next year almost nothing and the next year heavy. And if we prune and we have a lot of aeration in those branches, when they're dormant, we will get more yield as well. You also have to go through and pinch off. So if you have 5 apples on one tip, you need to pinch a bunch of those off. Otherwise, it's going to overhang that branch, break the branch, stress the tree. Pest prevention. So we talked about bugs, but the biggest pests that we have are birds, bunnies, and squirrels. So if you're doing a raised garden bed and you're investing your time and energy in building something that's above ground, hardware cloth is your friend. Roll it out, put your base around it, making sure that it's extending out from the edges so that something can't underdig and get in. And then you're going to layer it with mulch so that they would have to dig out and hit the hardware cloth before they can get into the bed. Then you can plant all your stuff or put your compost in or however you want to do it. I use from the Dollar Tree those little wire waste paper baskets that are about this tall and a pack of landscape staples. And you flip that upside down over your little plants and you pin them in. The birds can't eat them, the squirrels can't eat them, the bunnies can't eat them. When it comes to other things like squirrels and bunnies who like to eat your fruit as it's growing, tomatoes, blueberries, whatever, they sell mesh bags that are meant for jewelry. So those nice little ones with the drawstrings, they sell them in multiple sizes, in big packs. You can get them locally, you can get them on Etsy shops. You can also find them on Amazon. And you slip that over the fruit, pull it tight, tie it loosely, and then they can't eat at it. So if they can't get it to taste test it or mess with it, they leave it alone and you can open it up and take the plant off at the end. And they'll give you a couple seasons before they deteriorate. Any questions on that? So what I want you guys to design is think of a tree that you like, and then think of some plants that you would plant underneath it. One that's going to vine and wrap. Vines in general go where they want. So if we want to train them, we'll use that landscape staple, and we'll wrap the plant and pin it so that it can make its space to cover the ground, and plant things around it. You can plant tomatoes, you can plant peppers, you can plant peas and beans. You can plant something that lines up the tree, like a Kentucky pole bean, and then you have beans growing up in the tree, you have to harvest from it. Or you can do bush beans. Every bean that you buy at the store that's dried in that package will turn into a bean. Just keep that in mind. It's like 76 cents for like a pound, or you can go buy a little package that has like 12 beans in it, and it's like $3. They will always be bush beans from the store because it's easier to harvest and just shred the whole plant. Genetics don't necessarily matter if you're just feeding yourself. When we look at, and beans are one of those things where it doesn't really matter if it's high heat, it'll just keep going. Legumes will grow. Lentils are really easy to grow. However, lentils, there's like a 1 to 3. So every lentil you plant gives you either 1, 2, or 3 lentils. I don't feel like it's that great of like a return on investment. And you have to shake them and dry them to get them out. So a little bit more effort for that little lentil. But they're good as a nitrogen fixer, and they look pretty. Their flower's kind of cool. So think of what you would plant, and then I'm going to have you look up if you can plant that plant next to that tree. And if you can plant that plant next to that other plant. If you want to skip that, there are apps like Plantum, which is free. I will send you some links to different apps that can help you choose where you're going to plot your map and how you're going to set it up. The other thing that I recommend is that when you're in the planning phase, you make a notebook. So in here we have our composting temperature monitoring logs, and I've laminated everything so I can use a wet erase marker and keep my notes, and a bed plan. So as you're going through and you're determining, I can plant this with this tree. So you draw your tree, put where on your tree you're going to plant it, and then you say, oh, I can plant this with this thing, and you can add it. And if you can't, come up with another idea of what you can plant, because you can't, you shouldn't put peppers and tomatoes near each other, not because they're going to make each other taste funky, but because they're going to compete for resources. So you're going to end up with a stunted growth plant or a plant that doesn't have really great yields because they're sucking all the same nutrients out of the soil. Whereas you kind of want it so that some put some in, some takes them out.
I don't want to leave, but
No, you're golden. I get it. Oh, you guys, you have to pick out a plant. No, it's okay.
Yes, I guess you picked it.
One at a time. This is a desert willow, so it's a native tree.
Carefully, okay? You gotta carefully.
So in about 8 months, you'll have like a 5-leaf willow with these really pretty pink chocolate flowers. They produce seed pods that you can regrow if you harvest them as soon as they start to dry. If you have a dog who likes to chew stuff, just away from them. Sorry. No, you're good. Have a great day.
I need to wait for the next time.
We also have this, and I'll be sending all of this to you guys as well. So the date you planted, where you put it, how many were planted, if you transplanted it, the date that is due for harvest. And this is important if you're starting out and you don't necessarily know when something is ready to be picked or not, because you'll end up being in a situation where you're like, oh, it looks like it's ready, and then you pull it off and you're like, oh, it's not ready. And you just wasted like 48 days out of 60 waiting for it. So having that kind of ballpark on the first planting date, then you can go out and be like, okay, does this look ready? I'm gonna try it, and then you're usually good. We also have plant care. So if you're adding any sort of pest prevention items, gardening lime, kale, and clay, if you're using nematodes, if you're using what's called Bacterium israelis, which is a fungus gnat killer, because a lot of garden beds will develop those. It only impacts fungus gnats and mosquitoes, so it's not a problem with anything else. It's a natural supplement. It's bacteria. And then if you're sowing something, what month you're going to sow it in for the plants, so you can kind of have an idea of when they need to be grown outside in our area, as well as your weed control log. So if you went out and you removed weeds from what area you removed it from, so you kind of keep an eye on it and go, this was here, there's a likelihood it's going to come back. And then we can either amend the soil or block it with mulch so it doesn't. And then we did a layout of like our one orchard area so that everybody knows where everything is and what you're going to potentially plant under or over, and you can just make one of those yourself. Any questions so far? Now, not every plant needs to have a tree, but it should have shade. We have plants that are growing in full sunlight, they have no windbreak, they have no shade whatsoever, and yet they're thriving. And they've been thriving through an entire summer already and still going without pest pressure. But that is because they are in, one was just mushroom blocks and mulch that is already decomposed and is now nutrient-rich soil. The other one was just sheep poop, goat poop, hay remnants, and mulch, and it's now vibrant life, and then compost. if the straw bales that I have next to it, which are breaking down but still not the same, are a very different vision of how plants can struggle in our desert, even with food sources at their roots. Yes.
So, me personally, I would wanna plant more like herbs and veggies that I can consume. Would they be able to survive the summer
Mhm.
outside?
Oh yeah, and a lot of herbs do really well, but your herbs are your aromatics, which are part of your pest control strategy.
Yeah.
So if you look at, rosemary is gonna need more space, 'cause it's a shrub.
Yes.
So if you have a tree here and you have a tree here, I'm gonna recommend you put that rosemary in the middle, because that's gonna help. But you can use dill, you can use fennel, you can use lavender, you can use thyme, oregano. There's lots of different types of aromatics that you can use that repel pests. So they're good things to have right in that vicinity. So like maybe I'm gonna take my orange tree and I'm gonna plant a zucchini squash and I'm gonna pin it around so it's like a nice little opening, and I'm gonna put some, which I did currently, some chili tapine. And I'm gonna have that growing in one spot, which I highly recommend you also get in the spice section. And then I'm gonna have some dill over here and some fennel over here so that it's not competing with the roots, but it's making sure that that space is grown. I'm gonna add some marigold, maybe some basil to help keep everything thriving. And if I decide to throw a tomato down there,
Okay.
I'm gonna put it far enough away that it's like not in the same 4-foot block. But it's kind of like a math equation. You figure out what you're starting with,
Yeah.
and then you figure out what you can grow underneath it, and then you figure out what you can grow with that to make sure that you're not putting something in and then epically feeling like a failure at the end of the
Yeah.
day. So you can take your sheets home. There's some extras if you want a blank one as you design your space. And if you do not have a tree, that's okay. You can use a stick. I just recommend if you don't have a tree that you have something that can vine up. That can be like a native brush milkweed. It can be, we have another type of milkweed that does a really nice vine up. Loofah is really good because you can eat it. You can also use it to scrub your body. It acts as a really nice canopy, has really pretty flowers, withstands the heat, but it is invasive. So if you live in an area that's like a really nice manicured space, you monitor that or you don't plant it because it'll spread kind of like mint will. And basil is a really good self-seeder as well. So that's one of those things where if you don't sniff the flowers off of them, you'll end up with them everywhere. That's right, backyard is full of Thai basil right now. Basil is great. Any other questions? All right, we have some plants. Not everyone got it. So we have, I'm taking them around to you guys. So we have desert willows and moringas, and then we have some food-producing plants. So, I've got some bok choy, I've got some purple cauliflower, there's I think this is a squash. This one is melon, so watermelon. So it's a small compact watermelon that is yellow on the inside. We have nasturtiums. Nasturtiums are edible, but they're also a trap plant. I love nasturtiums, I think they should be everywhere. So if you're starting a garden, plant a nasturtium because bugs will eat that before it eats the rest of your garden. It's your plant god sacrifice item. And they're really pretty flowers. They have like a spicy kind of flavor to them, but you can use them in stir fries with squashes and zucchinis as well. This is a moringa tree. This is a bean. I think this is just a northern bean. Yeah, this is a northern bean. So this will be a bush bean. There's 3 of them. You can kind of get into plant art and twist your setups just like you can with moringa with some beans, and you'll just get a thicker space. Not every other tree can be done like that, and not every other plant can be done like that. This is desert willow. So do you have a dog that'll eat random things that it shouldn't?
I don't have a dog.
Perfect, so you can have a desert willow. It's a non-invasive root system. It is a native tree. It has a really nice peak tuber, and it'll grow in about 8 months. It'll be about 5 feet tall. And then they just keep going. They'll send out babies, and you'll be like, oh, where did that come from? So you can put it in a little pot and give it to somebody. Or harvest their pods and make sure that their pods have like hair, so they float through the air. And it's also one of those trees that likes to be in the light to germinate. You bury it in soil, so nothing is happening to it.
Which one's your bok choy?
I have bok choy. And the melon comes with either a tatsui or a bok choy. And that's another bok choy.
Maybe I'll just start. I just
Grab-
wanted
there's
to
some
see
tomatoes
like
in here
What
too.
would be best
Oh,
for like a
tomatoes.
garden bed? Cause I have to hear
Any of
concrete,
this.
any, okay.
Yeah, any of these. That's a nasturtium. I highly recommend. Oh, that's a good. I think it tried to eat your hair.
These are really big beans.
Yeah, and it's only like a week old. So
Yeah, we germinated.
yeah, they germinate
Yeah.
insanely fast.
The childhood.
A long time ago, we had a dog that was named Milo.
Oh, that's a cute name.
Let's go, you ready? Thank you.
And we have a Sprout and Sustain workshop on the 18th in Sky Valley from 1:30 to 3:30, and it's free and it's family oriented in our composting and gardening space. So anything that you plant there, you take home, and we also give adult seedlings as well.
Oh, what is this one?
That is a moringa. So it grows really well in a pot. It's fully edible and medicinal. It has an absurdly high rate if you're buying leaves over the counter. The seeds can be pressed for oil. It's all medicinal. It's really good for people with kidney disease, diabetes, heart conditions, and the entire tree is edible. So the pods can be cooked like okra when they're green and soft, or you let them become woody and you press the seeds for oil. The leaves can be dried and put into tea or blended up and added to smoothies, or you can eat them on your salad.
What is
That is
this
a
say?
nasturtium.
Okay.
You can have more than one plant.
Thank you.
That's why I brought them. That is a San Marzano tomato. There's actually several of them. So that is like the creme de la creme
Yes.
of tomato paste. Yeah, for your base for like all of your tomato sauces. And then we have a culinary tomato in here as well.
The cherry.
Yes. So that's actually a culinary cherry tomato. So you know when you go buy that like quartet, it's got like all the different colors. That's
Ooh,
that
yeah.
one. And there's a couple of them. You can always very gently swap them if you want. Tomatoes and eggplants are hairy, meaning that they have roots that'll come off the stem. So you dig the hole and bury that thing all the way up to its head, and it's just gonna grow a thicker stem that will withstand the wind better. I highly recommend it. You can also, as they shoot out, so these are your branches, okay? You have your main tomato stem, and then you have your side tomato. Oh, here, I'll turn it.
Thank you.
You have your